Hello and welcome to Coffee Break. I'm your host, Faith Jacobs, and today I'm joined by an amazing actor from over in the UK. He's produced some notable web series, and his resume is incredibly impressive. He's recently been a part of 2 projects of mine as of 2023, voicing the character of Chris Hendricks, and graciously gifting me his time for Polyglum in my fan adaptation of The Chronicles of Narnia, The Silver Chair. So without further ado, Ross, thank you so much for joining me.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah. Can you maybe start us off with a little bit about how you got into the world of acting and where your journey began? And then we'll dive right into my questions for you.
Absolutely. This one is, there are lots of kind of springing points where I can point to and say it starts here, but there are kind of incremental bits. Officially, at 18 months old, when I did a nappy advert, both, just to explain as well how I got that, both my parents are actors.
Okay.
And it came about through that. And so that's officially my start. Although, obviously, I had absolutely no say in that. And,
Right.
So I can't really say, oh, yes, I decided to be an actor at 18 months.
Right.
I was just kind of like, he'll do. He's here. He's, why can he say this line? And yeah, so officially 18 months.
Right.
If we fast forward a bit, then the first conscious acting choice I can remember making would have been when I was 8, when drama was optional in primary school. The primary school is kind of like can't really remember now. I think it's 7 to 11 years old in England. And yeah, I remember drama was optional. You didn't have to do it. It was kind of an after-school thing.
Okay.
I wanted to do it, and so my first decision role, first time I wanted to do it, was there. It was for the play Thumbelina, and I played a frog. I definitely, whether he had a name or not, I called him Ribbit, because if you don't have a name, it's kind of an old acting trope. If sometimes actors play like Man One or something, but then on their CV they'll lie and say he was called Dave or something like that. So I guess I kind of adopted that approach early on. So maybe I was a frog, or maybe he was called Ribbit. I'm pretty sure I probably just invented it. So there we go.
That makes sense. I've been in those roles too.
Brilliant.
I was cast in a little podcast called Bluebell Cafe, and I just played cafe members, and I'm pretty sure that I made one of them my terrible David Tennant impression. I was like, yeah, that's the doctor.
So that was the first conscious decision I remember making. From there, I did get an acting agent fairly early on. Again, through nepotism. Then, well, my parents helped me, obviously, because they knew where to go and who to approach. So I set out to audition. Did get an agent when I was about 12, but had a lot of close calls, a lot of near misses, for auditioning for a lot of children's TV at the time. I got very worn down because I kept getting so close, lots of recalls, and eventually I lost a bit of confidence, because and so I decided to sort of step away from it for a few years after a while, just because it's a very young age to take a lot of rejection.
Yeah, it is.
But it being in the blood, I eventually found my way back in my late teens, kind of on the advent of kind of YouTube being a new thing.
Okay.
And my friend and I decided that we would make some stupid sketches, and also off the back of that, we became stand-up sketch comedians, performing in London, performing on the comedy circuit in pubs and clubs. Joined a cabaret comedy performances, and then we did that and had a quite good amount of success. he eventually got tired and didn't want to do that anymore, wanted to go in an entirely different direction.
Right.
But me, by that point, late teens, I'd been immersed in this kind of making dumb sketches, getting good response, loving the thrill of performing. So for me, I had to keep going, and so from there, that was a good 15 or 16 odd years ago now. And yeah, just been doing it ever since.
That's cool. That's
Skirted around it, came back in, and then stayed around. Hopefully for good this time.
True. That's quite an impressive journey you've got there, and it will actually lead into my first question, which is your body of work is incredibly it's impressive. And you've done so much and of such a variety. But I'm curious, in all the years you have been acting, is there anything that you have yet to leap at the chance to do, either as a film role, a television role, podcast role? Like, is there anything that you haven't been able to like dip your toes into?
Like medium wise, I've yet to do anything mocap related.
That's a dream.
I would like to, because I've done a lot of video game recordings, but obviously nowadays on the really big ones, they combine both voice and mocap, so your character is really like you, as it were. That would be something very fun, I'm sure. I would love to give that a try at some point.
Me too.
Yeah, it should the opportunity present itself, and it'd be right.
Absolutely. I saw that through, I think I don't know if you're familiar with the video game Uncharted, but like back when mocap was in its early stages of like, I think 2014 when that game was like coming out and stuff, or no, that was 2008. When I was discovering it in 2014, it was just so impressive to me. Yeah, that would be an amazing opportunity. My second question then is, every actor has a field they thrive in, as you've done a lot of voice work as well as independent short films and web series. Between the on-camera world of acting and being in the booth, which do you feel you thrived in best?
I mean, I've undoubtedly done more voice work than I have live action at this point. Partly at some stage that became a necessity at the onset of the pandemic.
Right.
That became the primary thing to be doing. I probably was heading a little more towards that in some degrees anyway. In terms of thriving in which, like as you pointed out, I do kind of keep I do try and keep every sort of genre and type of acting going as much as I can. It might just it's a difficult one.
It's okay.
Just because thrive in the sense,
I guess maybe of the amount of work that you get, like you mentioned, you seem to have gotten, at least according to what I was seeing, like lots and lots and lots of work in the booth, and maybe like dubbing things or little cameos.
Yeah, so part of that is a conscious choice because I don't need to be a lead. Some people really want that, really strive for that, but for me, one of the reasons that my body work is so big is I purposely can do multiple roles in a day, doing the odd line here or there, or just a minor role there. And I'm perfectly fine with that, to be honest. I like being a day player with a lot of variety because it means I can get around so much. I'm not tied to one thing.
Right.
So I quite enjoy. So in terms of thriving, I'm happy doing smaller roles because there's no real small roles,
no
small actors.
That's true.
And I don't mean that in the sense of height wise. I just mean you can do a lot with a little role. And there's a wonderful quote by there's a wonderful thing in Peter Cushing's wonderful British actor in his autobiography, where he basically mentions that smaller, unquote, kind of supporting roles do actually have there is actually a degree of them being more difficult because you have less to work with, and you have to make the choice, a lot more choices, because they might not have a backstory, they might not have, you only got so much to go on to make the choices. So sometimes there's a lot of freedom to make a few more choices and kind of figure out how to best make them fit into everything. This doesn't really answer your question. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. No, I agree with that entirely, and I feel the same. When I was cast in my first role for Bluebell Cafe,
yes,
I had maybe one or two, maybe possibly, like I was like a spectator in like a trial crowd or something. I had one or two little lines I had to, so I gave them my all and gave them a personality and a different voice, and and just kind of was like, there's no such thing as a small role in the voice acting world to me, because every role is important in some way, even if it's just one scene.
absolutely.
So, and that my next question will kind of deviate a little bit from what we're talking about here, but I sampled one of your short films, and you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but you helped to write Watching the World Go By, right?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you. Having been involved with that process of that short film, it was a really powerful one to me. I'm curious. The protagonist of Michael was nonverbal, non-vocal. But the physicality you displayed and your expressions and the movements really sold the story for me, and I felt a lot of empathy. You're welcome. I felt a lot of empathy for the character. And my question for all that is, why did you choose to go with a character more severe in the spectrum, and what were the challenges of portraying that?
Well, I think that was needed for the story. It needed to be a character that had less awareness as to what was going on in the world around them, because obviously, for those who haven't seen the film, which will probably be pretty much everyone listening, that obviously Michael is on the obviously non-verbal, as you pointed out, non-verbal side of the spectrum. The choice of doing that was obviously, as I said, it's about the pandemic and the friend he makes. In his mind, the man who passes by, he decides is his friend, and he really likes him. And then one day he stops passing by, and it's on the radio. Obviously, there's talk of people dying from COVID. And obviously, to him, he has got absolutely no idea what's going on. So there's no connection to him. He just thinks the man has abandoned him as his friend.
Right.
So if he had a complete understanding of what was going on in the world, and was actually conscious of some of the things that weren't just his little world, his room, his little world. If he was more focused on what was going on in the outside world, then it wouldn't be that impactful if he had an idea. The idea is he thinks obviously this man has just betrayed him, or something wrong with him. And in terms of your other question as to how difficult it was, perhaps portraying. Well, for me, as someone who is autistic anyway, I'm autistic and dyspraxic. Obviously, I am what's known as, I guess, more
vocal, as
functioning, higher functioning, as it were. In that, there are just certain aspects of that I need more help with. But
of course,
I do not need 24/7 care. For example, where some people who are on the perhaps a different end of the spectrum might. But for myself, it's just kind of, for me, there is obviously a huge amount of Michael in me, in kind of like what I would classify as perhaps my, if I'm a really kind of heightened state, as it were, because certain things will set me off more, or kind of set me into a kind of a more confused state, as it were, for if I was highly stressed about something.
Right.
And I would go if at my absolute kind of like absolute breaking point of a meltdown kind of thing, I would go very, very silent. Yeah.
Non-verbal. And I've experienced that too. So
yes.
I also have a little bit of a stutter, so I apologize.
No, don't.
I felt very empathetic and sympathetic to Michael, because I definitely have experienced small pockets of that myself in my, as you say, in your limit. So it was amazing to me, just to, I think, see that in such a raw and a real way. You did amazing.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And this is a little bit of a sidebar, but do you think that if those kinds of more severe, if those kinds of stories are to be told, do you think, because obviously I don't know if you remember the controversy with a movie that we don't talk about, that was made a couple of years ago, here in the States, that was about a more severely autistic character, and it was portrayed by someone who was more neurotypical. There's a conversation around can we as autistics and autistic actors handle more intense material? And I think you kind of just proved that yes, we can. So do you think that maybe casting directors, if they're going to go that route, should they go that route, and should they be casting those of us who are a little more vocal?
I would. Are you talking about specifically for autistic roles?
Yes.
Yes. Now, I would say I think that there is a movement in the UK which my own agent has kind of helped push towards.
Right.
For this kind of thing, for there to be a greater push for diversity in casting, with inclusion of disabled and disabled autistic actors.
Yes.
As for should there is a difficult one. It's a difficult question in the sense of should a neurotypical be absolutely barred from doing the role? No, I don't think so. If they can do a brilliant job with it. But I do think there should be a higher percentage of I do think there should be a higher percentage of people with on the spectrum who are in consideration.
Yes.
The problem, I think, might come from, there are obviously only so many, although a lot of them, I would argue, are probably just undiscovered at this point. And, sometimes it's the bottom line is they want a big name star.
That's true.
So maybe the pool is not as big as they think. It probably is bigger than they think. But, just from they're looking at this from the bottom line is the top dollar, and they might not be aware of quite how many actually there are. And there should be more.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I have a couple of friends in my circle who are actors who are on the spectrum, and we've talked about this, and it's like, well, can we? Where do you draw the line? It's
difficult, because then, if we kind of maintain this hard-nosed thing of only autistic people can play autistic people, then why can't they push back and say, well, then you can't have any neurotypical roles because you don't fully understand them,
right?
And it's like, and there's a lot more of those roles, so I think we'd be shooting ourselves in the foot if we was like to really drive that.
That's true.
And on this note, I do just have to say there's this wonderful program called The Good Doctor with Freddie Highmore, who I absolutely think is one of my favorite actors. He plays Dr. Sean Murphy, an autistic neurosurgeon, and I just think he's fantastic in that role. I really do. I think he's an amazing actor anyway, but that is an impressive performance where certainly I say that was the right choice to make for that character. So if he has it.
Yeah, I think people, and I don't know if you've seen the recent the recent unfortunate making fun of some of the scenes that he's done that's happened online with the Good Doctor. I've not personally seen it.
Yeah.
But at the show, I mean, but I've seen some people kind of take, I think, a section of it out of context, and it's really sort of started to pervade more stereotypes rather than I think progressiveness, like
fair.
I wanted. But I do agree with you. He is an amazing actor. My next question for you is, what can you tell me about the production of the BBC radio show Our Liam of Lords, where you voiced the character of Noah, a character who is on the spectrum, and how, in being a neurodivergent actor yourself, have your experience helped to shape more authentic representation for projects like that and others?
Yeah. Oh, I love Noah. That is one of my favorite voice roles to date.
That was fun to listen to. I listened to some of the excerpts,
yeah.
and I will scour high and low to find that, because it sounds like a show up my alley.
I've got the original recording of that, so I can send you that if you're interested in listening to the full play.
That would be
yeah, that was an absolute joy filming that, recording that at the BBC. And obviously that's a great case where the BBC really did specifically ask me to try for it because of being autistic.
okay.
So in that way, yeah, it did work in my favor in that sense. So they were trying for that authenticity. Again, Noah is a little different to myself in terms of where he is in the spectrum, but again, it's kind of just honing in on certain aspects that I do have anyway, and just kind of dialing them up so slightly. But I completely understood everything of where he was coming from.
Yes.
And he's just he was a wonderful character. He doesn't care what he says. He'll offend anyone. No, offend's not the right word. He doesn't know he's doing it. He just says whatever comes into his head, and it's wonderful because of it.
I laughed. I just loved every single time. It's like, he's sad. No, no, no. I'm not sad. It absolutely was just because sometimes I feel like there are those of us who are on the spectrum who we will impulsively say things, and it's with no intent and no malicious intent, and we go
Yeah.
But it was amazing. The excerpts I've heard were absolutely wonderful.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was, I do think this obviously goes back to what we were saying as to should autistic people play autistic people. If they're right for it, then yeah. Does my performance in that help shape anything? I don't know.
I guess what I'm kind of getting at, and it sort of ties into my other question here, is I guess I'll kind of pull it into the discussion. In the recent years, there's been like leaps and bounds in autistic representation in the world of books and television, particularly over there with, I don't know if you're aware of like a kind of spark. There's a book called The Asparagus Bunch by a woman named Jessica Scott White, Cassandra in Reverse, Heartbreak High. And it seems like, and of course we have Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime with Christopher Boone. But as far as that goes, I have been thinking a lot about, there seems to be a lot of good strides made for autistic girls, but not much as far as autistic boys go. But my knowledge is also probably limited, because you've introduced me, of course, to what the BBC did with Liam of Lords, and I've seen some of the stuff that you've done. And all experiences on the spectrum are valid, but I'm curious, as you've played characters like Michael and Noah and Chris, and of course others, what do you hope showrunners and creators in the industry will do to be more inclusive to everyone on the spectrum, not just boys, not just girls, but maybe but both?
Obviously I would like to see it. I don't think there is enough, because there has been obviously a lot of strives in increasing diversity across all kinds of demographics, in terms of sexuality, in terms of race. I think disabilities are a little left behind by comparison.
Yes.
If the idea is to create to make our viewing experiences a little more matched to what society looks like, I think there has not been quite the focus on disability as a whole as there perhaps should be, or indeed to make that true representation, because there's a lot more out there than you see on screen.
Yeah.
So I do think I'd like to see more, obviously, in all aspects of disability, not just talking about autism.
No, I agree.
There's there are a lot. I've worked with some wonderful blind actors, and there's not a huge amount of blind roles. I think there should be more people, just more disabilities, really, because there are plenty of disabled actors. I'm part of a predominantly disabled agency, predominantly inclusive talent that predominantly is about autistic representation. It's not exclusively, but that's kind of the main focus. And so, I would say hopefully it is going that way. It might take a little longer to get that push across. But we if we want to get that true representation of society in what we view, what we listen to, then more characters who are disabled, and which in turn can create roles for more disabled actors as well.
100%. Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm curious, what can you tell me about All Quiet on the Holmes front and some of your web series creations? I did sample the little Secret of Mana web series you made. How did these things come to be, and what's the process of creating something of that caliber?
So the one you mentioned, All Quiet on the Holmes front, is a kind of a silent Sherlock Holmes series. I'm a big fan of Sherlock Holmes, and I have I've always had a lot of interest in him, and he is kind of, there's a school of thought that he himself is autistic. Obviously, this was, and you can see that in some of his. Absolutely, there is a argument for yes, he was, not consciously, because that was not a. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle would not have consciously made that choice. He based it on Dr. Joseph Bell, one of his old lecturers.
Yeah, he did.
So it was more. Now, was he autistic? Possibly. But again, while this probably wasn't a conscious choice, it was just something that has kind of come through. So maybe that's why I can kind of relate to him. But regardless of that, so All Quiet on the Holmes front is a silent film series, which you don't. I like silent film. I think there's because you kind of have to focus quite a lot with them. Because you're kind of reading as well. It's kind of weird. It's weird. It's reading and watching. And I think in some way that kind of draws you into the story more. You can't not have your focus elsewhere. And also, it's just wonderfully. There's also a simplicity to making silent film, that in the sense of not having to worry too much about sound.
That's true.
And you can get around a lot of things. It's there's a lot of shortcuts you can take, and cut between. It's just a lot easier. It's surprisingly quicker to, perhaps not surprisingly. It's a lot easier to make. Let's just put it that way.
One of my favorite short films has to be the illegal Nosferatu that was made, that I was so lucky to find. saved it on it and put it on Amazon. It wasn't supposed to be made, but it was.
Brilliant.
Brilliant film.
So yeah, that's so no. All Quiet on the Home Front is just kind of both a love letter of Sherlock Holmes, silent film, and because it's easy to make. I wouldn't call it easy, but perhaps easier than
easier than writing pages upon pages of dialogue and going, okay, now you say it like
yeah. Yeah.
And having to do a billion takes and then sort through the footage and find the right take.
Yeah. So that's why that exists, and also just on a note of on the mana stuff. Well, Secret of Mana, which is a Square Enix game, or Square Soft at the time, game that came out in 1993 for the Super Nintendo. It's a game that it's my favorite game of all time, and just holds a really special place in my heart. And so the kind of the web series I made based off it is just, again, the kind of just a make what you know kind of thing, and a love letter to it. And growing up, I always wanted to kind of go on that adventure, and so yeah, it's a kind of fulfilling that childhood fantasy of going on that adventure. So
that's a lot of fun.
So yeah, from my, I don't really consider myself an occasional. Yeah, I occasionally will write or direct things if they're meaningful to me, as we've kind of pointed out. That it's all things that I know about. I don't consider myself primary. I don't consider myself like a writer director so much. Those are more just little side projects of personal things. I very much more consider myself an actor than any of those things. But yeah, those are personal projects that I wanted to do because love letters, like I said.
No, they're fun, and I'm a huge Sherlock Holmes fan.
Cool.
Grew up reading. I have a big collection of Sherlock Holmes books on my shelf. I loved Basil Rathbone when I was younger. I loved his Sherlock Holmes. I grew up, of course, on Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock as well. So I highly regard him and Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce as like my.
They're wonderful.
So yeah, so that's really cool, and I'm actually excited to like dive more into that and check it out for sure. So what sort of roles, and for my next question, what sort of roles set your passion for acting and the process of the craft ablaze with joy? What gets you excited to leap at a project whenever you go for an audition, be it voice work or on camera work?
That is really that is an interesting one. I mean, it's partly it really can just depend on the role. I have to say I get an awful lot of auditions offered to me for the geeky nerdy characters.
Right.
I don't fully always, particularly for in commercials, I seem to get them offered to me to audition for. They don't always excite me too much in that sense. A lot of people seem to put me as that. I'm grateful for being considered for anything. They don't always excite me that much. I don't know why that particular thing just kind of like, maybe I don't know what it is. It's kind of like a lot of people see me as like a science nerd or a maths nerd, and it's like I don't really know anything about either of those. And not that you have to know to be an actor. That's not the point.
Right.
But I don't know. Maybe sometimes they're just not that well written because they're kind of stereotypical to the point of being just not that
interesting.
Interesting. And it's fine, but they don't. Though that doesn't necessarily light my fire. Whereas by comparison, I think this is a good example. It's even though sometimes some of those commercials where I get offered for playing nerdy science guy offer a lot of money, and that's all wonderful. But from an artistic perspective, I can't always say that that's really exciting
Right.
Whereas right now I am currently awaiting a recall in a couple of days for the role in a much lower paid feature film. But I'm far more excited about it because the role is for a dreadlocked meth head.
Oh my, wow.
And
That's cool.
for me, I'm far more excited about that, and I'm far more passionate about that idea, despite the pay just not being a huge amount. I really, really want to get it because the fact that someone went to my agent and thought and asked for me for this role, and it's like, yes, that's the kind of crazy character I absolutely love to do, but not enough people seem to think it, and that's absolutely fair enough to not think of me as that, but it is something that I absolutely can do because playing far more eccentric or far more, in this case, or very, very withdrawn and like almost dead to the world is something I can also do. And yeah, so for me, it's not, I was thrilled to be asked for it, and yeah, something different, something a bit more exciting, and
Yeah.
yeah, so that's something I'm very excited about because just the fact that someone considered me for something so different that's unusual, and I'm just surprised they saw me for, even though I believe it's fully in my wheelhouse to do. It's just an unusual request to be asked for to audition for. So to circle back to your question after all that waffle, if the role's exciting, if there's a lot to the dialogue, often it will go down to is it well written at the end of the day. If it's not well written, if it's clunky, or if it's just unreal to life, because you get a lot of people, some scripts, your mileage script will vary, and some don't even seem to speak like regular humans.
Yes.
And those ones don't excite me because it's quite hard to kind of turn them into something when it's like no one would say this.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
The thing about writing is that everybody thinks they can write, and
yes,
you can sit down on the computer and type out words. Will those words and that jumbled up alphabet soup you just put on that page make sense? Probably not if you don't have a foundation and know what you're doing. Now, it's not required for you to have honors in English. I do, to write, but I think it takes very specific people in the world to be the writer.
Yes, it's a fine skill.
It's like taking
very admirable
canvas and throwing it on and going, that's art. It's not. You threw some paint, and now it's just a blue thing on a canvas.
Absolutely. And the wonderful thing, what I find is well-written dialogue sticks in the mind so much easier. For when it comes to learning. If it only takes you a few reads and then you can be off book, then that's good writing as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
If you have to keep looking at the same sentence over and over and it's like it's not sinking in, then often I find the writing's not natural. If it's not sticking in for me to say, so do like a bit of good dialogue.
Yeah. Polish your scripts, people. As writers, I implore you, polish your scripts. Also, a little tidbit for everybody. Free tidbit. Add your emotions in your script if you are working with remote actors. And that'll be a podcast episode later solely with me. So that I can explain what I mean by that further. And why it's important when you're working with remote actors. But my next question for you is, out of all the roles you've performed, do you have any that stick out in your mind as your absolute favorite? And if you could revisit that role, if it were possible, would you?
This, I think we've kind of already discussed him, but Noah,
yeah.
For a lot of reasons. Because it was BBC, which kind of meant a lot to me. It was playing an autistic character, meant a lot to me. Was working with some absolutely wonderful actors, including Paul Reddy, Susan Jameson, who my dad had worked with many years ago on a series called All My Days. back in the 80s. So that was quite a nice tie back. And funny enough, there was at one point going to be a film version that got greenlit initially.
Wow.
And it was by the same writer, Alex Oates, the theatre writer, and he wouldn't have had the final say. He did very much. I was in discussions with him, and he said he very much would suggest me and champion me as reprising Noah for it. Then the pandemic happened, and it kind of got shelved. So.
That would have been cool. Like, just reading the synopsis of that story was so amazing to me. It hooked me instantly. I was very much I'm always intrigued by unique plots and unique stories.
I thought it was wonderfully written, and I thought it tied up. I thought it was, I thought it was also very respectful. I think because obviously the other main character, Liam, is an atheist and he's gay, and I think then he's on this retreat with his client who he looks after, Noah, on this religious retreat, and he's obviously going through his own turmoils, and I just think it was, I think it was very respectful for all beliefs, and I thought that was really lovely. I think everyone has something positive to say. I just thought it was a lovely story, and it deserved a film version with obviously
that would have
given it more. But I've got that out there. So, like I said, it was just a nice story where a lot of different belief systems were explored and fairly represented, with the good and the bad. And I think that was nice. That was so it's a shame that didn't come to be.
Hopefully, maybe someday they'll revisit it. You never know.
Life
But we've been talking a little bit, and we've been mentioning that you're you mentioned to me, I think, when you auditioned for Chris, that you were part of an initiative by the BBC to provide more inclusive Virgin talent. Now, what was that experience like? And I think you mentioned that it helped you a lot as a neurodiverse actor going forward. But how did it? But in the early stages, how did that kind of help you with your pursuit going forward?
That was it was called the BBC Class Act Programme, and it was where the BBC specifically put out a casting call for disabled actors to audition to be part of it. And I was one of the ones that got through. They ended up choosing 30 across the country for this training program, where essentially we would be trained by them and have access to workshops and kind of like tailored bespoke training with some of their finest directors, producers, actors, and to make new connections and really kind of give these disabled actors their leg up in the industry. It was absolutely helped me because that was how they became aware of me, which led to our Liam of Lords and the role of Noah. So that was it helped me in that sense. It immediately, very shortly after completing it, I got another agent when I had been agentless at the time, just representing myself. So that absolutely helped there. For me, those were the major boons I got out of it. And also it's just a wonderful calling card, to this day, to say that I was chosen and I was on it. And it goes back to the idea. Obviously, the point of it was the BBC had a goal to, I think, like 7%. I think some figure like that. I think they wanted somewhere like by some year to have 7% or 9% of roles to be disabled, the actual kind of like characters or the actors at least,
right.
in their productions. They were trying for it, but the problem is they don't make absolutely everything themselves. There is a lot of things they make kind of working with, and the production companies they were working with were saying, well, we don't know where to find these disabled actors. So they've got the BBC saying, we want more disabled actors in these productions, and they were saying, well, we don't know where to find them. So the BBC thought, this is why they came up with this, to, kind of trying to get a push for disabled actors.
Yeah.
I think obviously, as we've discussed, we're still very much working towards that being a much bigger thing for disabled actors to have more roles. But it was a good start to have. Let's just hope that it gets built on and kind of revisited, and it's something that does indeed we do start to see a bit more, because we could see more of that.
I agree with that. There's a little thing over here in the States that launched recently. It was in beta as of 2021. It's called Ability E, and it is an attempt over here in the States to sort of have a disability like roster of different disabled talent over here in the States. And I found a couple of the actors who were actually part of the Can't Get It special, A Day With You, which you've openly auditioned for through that. So I think there's a similar initiative. I know Disney backs it. I know ABC is backing Ability.
Oh, wonderful.
And they utilized it for a little film over here on Disney Plus called Loop, that featured a slightly non-vocal, non-verbal autistic actress. So there is some initiative, but it's in the very early stages. So, and I'm a part of that as well. So,
oh, wonderful! Well done.
Yeah. And it was so. I appreciate initiatives like that, because that's helpful. That brings more diversity into the fold, and I'm definitely a believer that neurodiversity is diversity. Let's see, where are my questions? Okay. Question 11. Now, did you or do you ever worry, as someone who deals with dyspraxia and autism, as you've mentioned, that despite all the leaps and bounds in the progressive world of neurodiversity, do you ever worry about being typecast or pigeonholed because of your disabilities? I know some of my fellow neurodiverse actors in my own circle have talked about why it matters for empathy and why it matters to bring our lived experiences. But we also talk about being sort of typecast or pigeonholed in just those roles. As you've been in the industry much longer, what are your thoughts on all that?
For me, I think this goes back to a couple of questions we've already discussed. I don't think there's enough neurodivergent roles for me to be typecast. That's why I'm always happy. I'm happy to be asked for them. They don't come around too often they don't come around enough for me to be typecast in it. Absolutely, if one comes around, for invisible, I would love to get more invisible disability or autistic spectrum type roles offered to me to audition for. It doesn't happen too much. Like I said, I probably get nerds, science nerd, maths nerd, far more than I do autistic people. So for me, I'm not worried about. I'm not worried about being stereotyped into those roles, because I've done enough different roles to prove that I am not exclusively that. I would like to see more so that I could actually be in danger of perhaps even getting into that state, to be completely honest.
I have yet to voice one that I voice. For my listeners, I voiced Jacob Frost in Can't Get It. It's my own creation. I have never to this day probably voiced a character that was on the spectrum, or any kind of spectrum,
That's a shame. And which goes back to what we said. People should create more.
Yeah, we need more, please, listeners or powers that be, powers that be, please help us. But no, that makes sense, and I was just kind of curious. Like you have such a wide variety of roles that I've seen you in, and very few ones that match your neurotype, which is fine in some ways, but maybe not so fine in the others, because I think it just shows the state of where we are with that. But no,
Yeah.
that definitely is interesting to me. My next question is on the subject of fan made works, because you've made so many yourself, and you've also been a part of fan productions such as Doctor Who, fan audio dramas, or some fan mod video games. Sometimes I see like discourse out there about fan-made projects, especially when it comes to building a resume of work. There's so many do's and don'ts, and I'm curious, what do you think of that? Do you think that it's okay for us to to utilize these things as part of an early actor's resume, or is there a point in time where we have to cut it off and go, I really can't?
I think when you're starting out, when you're building stuff up, absolutely, it's a wonderful, safer environment as long as the people you're working with are nice.
Yeah.
Because you will get some people that can be a bit,
Yeah.
a bit spiky, and perhaps they really shouldn't be if you're doing stuff for them as a favor.
Yeah.
But for learning your craft, absolutely, if it's something you love. For me, if it's something that interests me, or like I said, it's kind of goes back to what I was saying about the whole minor role day player thing. If it's a line here or there, I'm not that bothered. If I've got the spare time anyway, I'd rather be doing something creative than something not. Right. So I don't mind participating for minor roles like that. Would I put some of them on the top of my spotlight CV? No. I just because that is specifically more tailored to more professional things,
right.
With kind of more known companies, as it were. But am I bothered about them ending up on my IMDb? No, because it just creates a massive body of work in the sense that shows that my experience. I'm not fussy about that. But there, like I said, there probably is a cutoff point where eventually, ideally, you may not have time to participate if you get to such a stage. But to be completely honest, because I have done, I myself have created so many little things myself, I get it. I understand that passion. You want to kind of, I don't mind. A lot of people helped me out with my own things, so I kind of come in from that way as well. That people helps me out, so I don't mind helping people out for little things as well. Am I now at the stage where I'm moving away from it? Yes. Unless it really, really interests me, then I will. Then I'm happy to participate. I probably am trying to move away from actively going after them. If people ask me, then yeah. Funny enough, you obviously asked me for your C.S. Lewis Chronicles of Narnia thing. That one, obviously, I jumped at the chance of that one because I like C.S. Lewis as a writer, as a person. I think he and Chronicles of Narnia is a good one. And plus, when you mentioned that, you were kind of the previous actor I was taking over from, aimed for a Tom Baker-esque character, and I thought, oh well, I have to. That was too good an opportunity to miss up. I love his narration.
By the way, you have done amazing. That's amazing. I'm so excited for everybody else to kind of allow them to record their stuff, because and if you want to hear that, I'll send you the link to the episode that we did. And because it's just you have done amazing, both as Chris and as Polyglum, and I'm humbled and I'm grateful. I'm really grateful. Let's see. The next 3 questions are some fun ones. So
Sure.
The world of movies and television have entered an era of revamps and remakes, which
Mm-hmm.
isn't entirely a bad thing, especially if it gives a chance for others to portray iconic characters in a unique way. My question for you is, are there any iconic characters from past films or TV shows who you could see yourself portraying in some way if the story they come from were to be remade today?
Hmm. Um. Well, I am surprised we have not yet seen. There is a series of films called the back in the 80s, which is loosely based upon some of H.P. Lovecraft's stuff, the Reanimator films. Um, I'm kind of in a way I'm surprised those have yet to be revisited. Um, I would absolutely could see myself in, this is, I suppose this is a bit of ideal casting, playing the role of Dr. Herbert West, the kind of crazed scientist. I know I said I don't really want scientists, but I'm talking about this guy's a bit different.
Like young Frankenstein style.
Yes,
scientist.
yeah, because he essentially is that it taps into the high energy, kind of more insane kind.
Yeah.
Obviously, his whole thing is absolutely is reanimating, trying to bring back dead people, and it kind of always goes horribly wrong because he can't. It doesn't work very well. It never does, and he never learns. He keeps trying, and it just gets increasingly worse with what happens. But that role, that's a kind of high energy role that I would, with brilliant dialogue, that I would love if it ever came back. I would love to do. So yeah, that's one that springs to mind.
That would be amazing and cool to see. So we've mentioned, of course, that you've tackled the character of Sherlock Holmes, but are there other characters from classic literature you could see yourself bringing to life? Either web series form, podcast, or otherwise, who captivate your interest as much as Sherlock has?
I would absolutely say that, because I do have, again, the other thing, I have a big interest in any kind of character that is kind of, I love the Victorian era, so any sort of the upper class aristocratic ish type roles, anything along those veins, I am completely with love. Going back to another missed opportunity. Are you familiar with the series The Gilded Age?
Oh, I am, yes.
I was at one, again, shake my fist at you, COVID. I was. They had a lot of interest in me for playing Oscar Wilde.
Oh, wait a minute.
But that did not pan out. Thanks, COVID. That would have been fun. That would have been amazing. So yeah.
I have an idea to adapt Dorian Gray at some point.
Yeah.
I do. I actually have been working on trying to like similar to what I did with Narnia. I would like to adapt Dorian Gray. Really influenced me when I was a lot younger, and
brilliant.
It was an amazing story that will never leave my whose would. But that's cool. I love Oscar Wilde's works. That would have been amazing.
Brilliant.
So last fun question. If you could write a major feature film for any genre, sky's the limit with everything, budget, actors, location, etc. What would the film genre be, and what would it entail story-wise? Would it be an original one or an adaptation?
Sure. That's a good question. Trying to think. I think I would probably want to go for original, Because I think, yeah, obviously I've done my own little, like I said, things that I'm passionate about, adaptations of various properties. But you run, I think you run the risk of offending. If you get it wrong, I think there's greater risk of upsetting a lot of people. If it's original, the downside of that is, yeah, obviously, if it doesn't work, you've only really upset. You're not going to upset any kind of original fans
Right.
to a property. But then on the other sense, there's the sense of failure if it doesn't work, and it's like you might put your whole heart and soul into it, and then the world rejects it, and then you're just like, oh. And maybe there's a little bit of a barrier if it's not your property entirely. I don't know.
Right. True. That's
like
true.
like I said, I don't really consider myself writer director these days. Yes, I did my little passion things here and there, but primarily I consider myself an actor. And there are far more talented people out there, writers, directors, who I would just like to rather just be part of what they envision than create anything myself these days.
That makes sense. So last 3 questions. What's your process as an actor? Do you subscribe to any techniques such as Meisner, Adler, and I'm gonna butcher this name, method acting? How doesn't want to work right now?
That's fine.
How when digging into the characters you portray, do you get into the headspace of those characters you're reading for through your own processes?
First of all, from the technical learning aspect, I consider the way I always do it is I will handwrite my lines over and over again on a page for learning it. That I find, because this is a scientifically proven method. If you actually put pen to paper and put it on, and you physically write it out, there is a far greater recall going on. So in terms of learning, that I find is the best way for me to learn is quite simply write out my lines.
Right, repetition helps.
Yep. So that on a purely technical basis. For diving into the head, yes, I absolutely look at what depending on who the character is, I will seek out films and music that will put me in that headspace. So if it is, for example, a military character, I might go on a binge of, a succession of watching more military-based films, as it were, or military filmed music. It's something or far more. Or if it's a horror film, then I will, tailor my listening and watching to more horror based, or anything that I might think is a little bit more related. So I kind of, whoever I'm playing, I tend to, I'm a massive, I love reading. It's one of my greatest hobbies. And I used to actually have a book review show which was quite popular back in the day. And people used to send me their books and everything, which was quite wonderful. But it became too much like work, and I think it took away the passion of reading.
Right.
Kind of reason I ended up stopped doing it. And I just wanted reading to be my own thing, my own pleasure, without having to turn it into something else. But on that point, again, watching films that are relevant, listening to music that's relevant, and reading books that are relevant, particularly autobiographies, which are my absolute favorite choice of reading. I absolutely love reading autobiographies, so I will try and find any kind of associated people who might have gone through similar things to this character, or anything that is in some way, even be it fictional or otherwise, whatever it is, if it somehow relates to my character in some way, be it setting, era, then I'll probably go with that. So yeah, to answer your question, I will turn my entertainment mediums of watching, listening, reading to a little bit skewed towards who I'm playing in some way.
Gotcha. So you mentioned that both your parents are actors.
Yes.
What was it like growing up as like being part of the business? Urged to do that. You mentioned you faced a couple of challenges and obstacles along your journey, but how did that kind of help to shape where you are even in the now?
It helped me. Obviously, it helped me hugely because it got me going back to the 18-month start. That wouldn't have happened were it not for my mum. I probably wouldn't have got an agent very, very early on if it weren't for my mum. And when it came to creating shows, obviously my parents have helped, even being in them. So that's good. And they didn't mind me kind of like taking up entire rooms and turning them into studios, putting up permanent green screens, because ultimately it was symbiotic in that I could help them. They came from a very different acting era where there was not obviously self-tapes and things like that. Right. And so because of me, I've been able to help them very much adapt into what the acting world is now. And, they don't need my help now. My mum's, she'll get upset and say that she can't do any of this technology stuff, but she's a whiz with the iPad and filming herself and getting it all sent off and everything like that. She does herself a disservice. And so and obviously they completely understand what I'm trying to do here. I've never had that parental thing of, are you, what are you doing? Are you sure this is a good idea kind of thing? Obviously I've had nothing but support for what I've been trying to pursue. So I have been very, very fortunate in that. I know that not everyone has had that at all.
And that's encouraging. That's really cool. That they were so supportive and you just like even when you said, I think you mentioned that you stepped away from it for a bit because that just constant rejection can just really just get you.
Yeah, especially at 11, 12, it's a bit much.
Yeah, and I feel like, and maybe it's a me thing. I feel like if you're on the spectrum and you are neurodivergent in some way,
yeah,
you're used to the rejection in life, but I think the consistency it's a little bit worse for us sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think it probably hit harder. I wish I had, I wish I had stayed, but it turned out as it did, and I'm here now. So yeah.
Yeah. So my last question for you is, in all the experiences you've had, what are some of the most prominent lessons you gained that were positive and taught you something you didn't expect to learn from them? How did those lessons gained keep you motivated to continue going at the acting world, even when things can be difficult, or even unpredictable, like what happened with COVID?
Well, sorry, can you repeat that question?
Oh, it's okay. Yeah. In all the experiences you've had, what are some of the most prominent lessons you've gained that were positive and taught you something you didn't expect to learn from them? How do those lessons gained keep you motivated to continue going at the acting world, even when things can be difficult or maybe even unpredictable?
For me, I would... I would say, sometimes this does...
Take your time. It's okay.
I think that... I would say that... I think it goes back. I think I'm going to have to go back to, well, what I consider the greatest learning lesson I've been told, that I still consider to this day, and often think about is when I was working on Our Liam of Lords, and with Susan Jameson. She gave me this piece of advice that I still, that still sticks with me to this day and keeps me going on. In that, she said to me, she's a wonderful veteran actor. She'd been doing it about 60 years at that point. And she said to me that so many people everyone wants to be an actor, but very few need to be an actor. Those that need are those that stay and will eventually find their way to the top. And you, from what I've seen, you're someone that needs this. You will not be happy unless you're doing this. And that meant a huge amount to me, and it's still something that I think about to this day. And despite so much rejection going on and everything, all the difficulties that do come with this industry, I think about that advice a lot, that she is correct in that I do need this, and there will be a little part of me that is missing if I don't do it. So regardless of whether I do get to quote unquote top, whatever that is, to me, I need to do this. So that is something that keeps me going, and is probably one of the finest lessons, as it were, that I've been told, and I think about it to this day. I would not be happy if I was not doing it. So therefore, I keep doing it because I need to do it to be happy. Simple as that.
That makes sense, and I agree with that. It was like the first time I stood behind a mic in this class that I took, and I felt like for the first time out of everything I had ever tried in my life, that I belonged behind that mic. Somehow, some way, I just belonged behind that mic. And
absolutely,
and I think there are times where we as actors definitely do feel like we are gonna just throw in the towel and quit, and I'm done with this, and I can't stand this anymore, and they don't want my voice, or they don't want my face, or whatever, and then you have those moments where actually something comes along and you are cast, and that just reaffirm, and you have people alongside you, hopefully mentors, peers, people you look up to, who eventually kind of sit you down and give you some honest mentorial love and go, they want you to be good. Why don't you want you to be good and keep doing it?
Exactly.
But with that, we have come to the end of our show. Thank you again, Ross, for jumping on and doing this with me. Is there anything coming for you in the future you can talk about, or places where people can find and follow your works, and just as our closing statement?
I think there's always things coming out for me that are in various stages of production. Some I've probably forgotten about, to be completely honest, but which I find quite wonderful. When I suddenly am told, "Hey, this is out," I'm like, I don't even know who I voiced in this, but brilliant. I've got some that happens too, because sometimes things take years, and you just, if you, like I said, if you keep doing lots of minor roles and you're just happy doing that, then sometimes you forget about certain ones. And it's quite wonderful. I don't mind that. Like I said, if anyone is interested in, I'm on Twitter at Ross K. Foad, and same again, just on YouTube. If you just search my name, you'll come across my YouTube channel there. Those are probably the most active ones, places I can be. So if anyone is interested, then feel free to give me a follow or a subscribe over there.
Absolutely. And Definitely looking forward, everybody, to show. I hope that we all, please listen. Ross did amazing as Chris as well, and Chaotic Idiots. A day without you. It's out now. It will be edited for future reference for 2 scenes that are still in the process of creation. But you also will be able to hear him as our Puddle Glum in the second part of the. I did. Very excited. That will take a little while just because life, but it is coming.
Brilliant.
And I will keep everybody updated. So thank you again, Ross.
No,
and
thank you. It's an absolute pleasure.
Wonderful to have you. Have a wonderful day, and I'm excited to see where you go.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much again.
Of course.
And good luck to you with everything as well.
Thank you, Ross. Bye-bye.
Bye.